Good evening, members. Welcome to our licensing committee. Before we start the meeting, I must read the webcasting. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of subsequent repeated viewing, with copies of the recording being made available for those that request it. By being present at this meeting, it's likely that the recording cameras will capture your image, and this will result in the image becoming part of the broadcast. You should be aware that this may infringe your human and data protection rights. If you have any concerns, then please speak to the webcasting officer. Apologies for absence, then.
Yes, Chairman. Apologies from Councillors Jennings, Hadley, Lyon, Sarton and Stalker.
Are there any other apologies? No? Right. Are there any declarations of interest? No. No? Any other business?
No other business, Chairman.
And we go on to item 5, is the minutes of the Licensing Committee on the 1st of November 2022. Can we agree those are correct records? Did you say yes, John, or put it up for a question?
It's really a question arising from the minutes. It says in the minutes that the statistics will come to the March meeting, and this is the March meeting, and I didn't see the statistics that were referred to.
Sorry, Chair, that's my fault. Sorry, I neglected to send them through before I went on leave. I'll be happy to circulate those as a separate document to the committee members if they'd like, just for the update.
Okay. Now, the item 6 is the minutes of the licensing subcommittees. Those who were chairman have got them all to be signed and handed back to Adrian. Item 7, Coronation Road closure and extended licensing hours. I'll ask David King to take us through it, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, I don't intend to go through the full report because I know that the committee have been cited on it and had a chance to digest the information. However, you will recall that in the November licensing committee meeting, it was suggested that we adopt the simplified process for dealing with road closures for His Majesty the King's coronation, and that was agreed by committee. At that time, we didn't know whether or not we was going to waive the fee, as we did for Her Majesty the Queen's Jubilee, and a decision was subsequently taken that we would waive the fee. The system, we've done a lot of comms for this. We've issued press releases. There's been information and guidance that's gone out on our website, and I'm pleased to say again it's been a success. We've currently had, currently processing 26 applications for road closures. It's slightly shorter than the number we received for Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee. However, we anticipate a similar number coming in as there's still some time to go for applications. Chair, just going on to the extension of licensing hours, just to bring you up to date with that. Under the Licensing Act, the Secretary of State has the power to extend licensing hours for occasions of national significance, as was the case during the Platinum Jubilee. The Secretary of State is actually looking to increase the licensing hours for pubs, restaurants and bars on the Friday the 5th, Saturday the 6th and Sunday the 7th of May. If agreed, this will extend the opening hours from 11 o'clock until 1 a.m. the morning following. And this will apply to regulated entertainment also and late night refreshment. However, it will not apply to off-licences, supermarkets or late night takeaways. At the moment, it is likely that this will be approved. However, we're just waiting for the formal announcement. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions regarding that item? Okay. If not, we'll move on to item 8, which is starts on page 15, which is the road closure policy. And you see the policy there on page 19. Over to you, David.
Thank you, Chair. So as you're aware, Epping Forest District Council has the power to issue temporary road closure orders for special public events. Currently, the Council does not have a policy that sets out the general approach to regulation under the Act, guides its administration of its functions and its expectations in relation to road closure applications for special events. Whilst there is no legal requirement for the Council to have a formal policy, it is apparent that the previous process is no longer fit for purpose. It placed unnecessary burden on residents and partner agencies, and there was no governance in place to provide clarity to applicants and guide the Council in its administration and decision making. In the last 2 years, the Council's licensing team have processed over 80 applications for road closures as part of Her Majesty the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations and the forthcoming coronation of His Majesty the King and Her Majesty the Queen Consort in May. As the committee are aware, to facilitate the increase in these applications, we reviewed and simplified the process. This was a success and with positive feedback from residents, Essex Highs and other partner agencies, including the police, fire, ambulance and bus networks. The proposed policy follows this process, and if adopted, it will have a number of key benefits, including to provide clarity and guidance to residents, improving the customer journey. Residents will only have one formal point of contact, and that will be the licensing team. Residents will only be responsible for consulting with hospitals, schools, churches, fellow neighbours, businesses and town and parish councils in their immediate area. The licensing team will consult with all other responsible authorities. This will limit the unnecessary contact on partner agencies, as the applicant will only have to deal with the Council. The Council can be assured that the key partners have been properly notified and consulted before making a decision on the closures. And the Council can ensure that all of the relevant information, including diversion routes, etc., has been included at the point of application, avoiding the unnecessary delays and back and forth between those involved. In addition, it is also proposed that the policy delegates decision-making responsibility to the Service Director in consultation with a portfolio holder and Chair or Vice Chair of the Licensing Committee where objections are made and not withdrawn. This is in line with the process adopted under the Council's pavement licensing policy, and it will promote consistency and transparency. Currently, contested applications are to be determined by the Licensing Subcommittee. However, there are no procedures in place for this function, and this can prove difficult due to time constraints. In terms of the adoption of the policy, the committee should note that there has been an error in the report. The report requests that the Licensing Committee agree the proposed road closure policy and recommend full Council adopt the policy. However, this is incorrect. Under the Council's constitution, power to determine policy under the Town Police Clauses Act 1847 is delegated to the Licensing Committee. Therefore, if the committee are minded to approve the road closure policy, it will not need to go to full Council for adoption, as suggested in the report. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sugar.
Thank you, David. It's good to see that we're going to be finally celebrating something in the King's coronation. Question really around, so with the road closures, can we have something to say, or is there something in there to say the ward councillors for that particular road where the road closure is taking place will be, well, not consulted, but be informed?
We certainly can do that as a matter of process. Certainly with the, for example, for the coronation, and certainly for the Queen's Jubilee, so we keep a spreadsheet of all road closures. And because of the number, and what we will do ahead of those events is we will then circulate those to the responsible authorities, and we can do that to also the town and parish councils, just so they're aware where road closures are in their area. Typically, we would only have about 3 or 4 road closures a year. So they're very few and far between. It might be the Christmas tree light switch on in Faden Boys, or a small event going on in Ongar. So that they're relatively small in number. It's literally been this last couple of years where we've had such a large number. But that's something we can consider if you think it would be of benefit.
Okay. Councillor Whitehouse.
Yes, I was going to make the same point about ward councillors, being consulted. They are more likely to know, the ins and outs of local roads than the portfolio holder or the licensing chair, however eminent those people are. It's not entirely clear where whether this is written sort of mainly for street parties or for sort of wider events like, as you said, Christmas light switches on, remembrance, commemorations, etc. I wasn't clear if the application form at the end with street parties was part of the policy and the application form referred to, or there's a separate reference to an application form in there. And I think it needs to be clear what's part of the policy and what isn't part of the policy. And I was thinking about Ride London as well, and whether that fell under the policy, and that is clearly a trunk road thing, so for the county council. But if this is meant to be clarity for applicants, it might be best to put in the introduction that longer term means more than 24 hours, or longer term means more than 48 hours, or, you know, I think it's still quite easy to read that and not be clear whether you apply to the district council or the county council.
With regards to, so Ride London, so that's done at county level, so that would imply these are for small road closures for national rejoicing or one-off street parties and so on and so forth. So we can clarify that. The application that's actually included in the report isn't our application. That was actually part of the government's guide to organising street party. That was just included in the report for information. So we actually have our own separate application and guidance.
Okay. Are there any other questions? No, right. So the two recommendations are to agree the proposed road closure policy and to recommend to full council adopt the proposed road closure policy.
Not the second one.
Sorry?
Not the second one, just the first one.
Oh, that's right, yes, sorry.
What about suggested changes, Chairman?
Sorry, Chair, just to be clear, the consultation with the Chair of Licensing and the Service Director and Portfolio Lead is only where there's objections made and not withdrawn. So they're not actually it's not part of the consultation. So we would only consult with those because Councillor Whitehouse made the comment that obviously the local councils would be more aware of issues in their area rather than the Chair of Licensing. But hopefully that clarifies it. Or would you still like to be consulted?
Well, yes, I mean, if there are objections, it seems to me that the ward council is in quite a good position to advise about those objections, justified or not. I mean, it's only including up to 3 more addresses in an email, isn't it?
Sorry, just so I was clear. So, yeah, so we was a misunderstanding. I thought it meant to be consulted on every application, but what you actually mean is to be consulted on only those where there's objections. If that's what the committee's happy with, then I'm happy with that.
Okay. You all right with that, John? Okay, any other questions? So we agree that recommendation 1. Right, we'll move on to item 9, which is the Gambling Act Statement of Licensing Policy on page 31 to 66. And over to David again.
Thank you, Chair. Under section 349 of the Gambling Act, licensing authorities are required to prepare a statement of principles that they propose to apply in relation to their regulatory responsibilities in gambling. The policy must be reviewed every 3 years, and where reviewed and changes proposed, licensing authorities must consult on any revision and the statement must be then republished. The current policy was approved by the Council in 2020. It is now being revised and only minor amendments have been made to reflect the latest guidance and to update the area profile in line with Essex County Council Census 2021 and the National Office for National Statistics data. A copy of the draft statement of licensing principles is attached to this report at Appendix A. In developing their statements, the Act requires licensing authorities to consult with the Chief Officer of Police for their area, those representing the interests of gambling businesses in their localities, people likely to be affected by it or those who represent them. And it is a matter for licensing authorities to develop their own consultation practices, including the method of consultation and who they consider it necessary to consult. However, Epping Forest District Council has consulted widely on this policy by letter, email and on its website. A list of those consulted is also attached to the report at Appendix B. During the consultation period, the Council's licensing team received 3 responses, one on behalf of the Chief Officer of Police, one from Loughton Town Council and one from Epping Town Council. we received no objections to the proposed policy. A copy of those responses received is attached to this report at Appendix C. It is therefore recommended that the Licensing Committee agree the revised Statement of Licensing Principles and recommend full Council adopt the revised Statement of Principles. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Go on.
Oh, and I have read the whole thing. The only question I've got is the first paragraph of Part A. I mean, have regard to is weaker than promote, and I just wondered why we were seeking to sort of downgrade it in that way.
We're not, that's what it states in legislation. There were some anomalies when I went through the policy. There was some omittance and some wording that should have been included that wasn't. So that was one of the specific things that I changed, because that's the wording in the Act.
Okay, so previously it went beyond the Act, is what you're saying?
Okay. Any other questions? So we've got the two recommendations on page 31. Can we agree those recommendations? Agree, right. Move on to item 10, review of current and future training needs for the committee. The training needs will be for new members who come onto the committee after the election. David, do you want to say any more about this?
We're happy to tailor any courses, Chair. Obviously, we'll look to see what new intake we get of members, and we'll offer, obviously, individual training for those members. And also, I'm happy to put that out to other members of the committee. If there's any specific areas you'd like us to cover on future sessions, then I'm glad to do that. So if there's any suggestions from the committee or its members as to areas where they think that there could be some additional training needed, then I'm happy to take those on board.
Kelly Matthews.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to comment on that, as a new member last year, David offered me some one-to-one training, which was absolutely incredible, really helpful and really insightful. So I'd strongly recommend that it's compulsory for, obviously it's compulsory that we have to have the level of training, but recommend that that's done as soon as possible. And I think an addition of a sort of an annual update for all members, just to sort of refresh a few things for people, would be hugely beneficial for the whole committee.
Okay. Councillor Silger.
Just, David, would you be able to clarify what's the period like? So if someone's done training, what's your recommendation that a member should go back to do training, like a year, 2 years, 18 months? So, for instance, is there a specific sort of a recommendation that it's advisable to go back and do the training again for some of us seasoned members?
I think certainly refresher training every 3 years. And as Councillor Matthews has suggested as well, that we could do bite-sized chunks and also refresher training. If you recall, in the chair in the November committee, I actually did a section on Live Music Act. And we can do, going forward, it'd be good to then provide updates for members on things like that. And if there's any areas that I feel that we need to kind of strengthen and work on, then I'll tailor the training towards that.
Chair, can I just also echo what Councillor Matthews said, that Mr King does deliver a very good in-house training, so highly recommend it.
Okay. Councillor Kesker.
Thank you, Chairman. The first is a question. I think I probably know the answer to this one, and then I'll go on to a comment. There's no changes in the law since the last major training session that we had, in fact, online from the outside training person who was a lawyer.
No, there isn't, Chair. And what I'll tend to do with licensing committee anyway is if there are any changes, then I'll bring them to your attention, and then we'll programme in further training as and when it's needed. So I'll highlight that to you as a committee first, give you a briefing on it, and then we'll look to do further courses.
Chairman, just as a comment, I must say, having been now on a number of both live and Zoom courses on these, for those of us who've done it all before, the Zoom course was more than adequate, in fact. But the face-to-face course, which was done here, in fact, in the chamber, I think for new members, it made them take part in it much more by being face-to-face. And I know you're saying you're doing them on a one-to-one basis, which may now be the answer. But I think new members got more out of that than they would have done from a Zoom course, whereas the rest of us just updates and little reminders. The Zoom course was more than adequate.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, certainly for new members like to do face-to-face meeting, I think it's good I can introduce myself as well. And also then it allows obviously a flow of information and obviously more questions back and forth.
Any other questions? Right. Review of licensing subcommittee procedures. Anybody want to comment on that, or? Councillor Whitehouse.
There is one thing that's come up once or twice, and that's the way that you end up with quite complicated conditions sometimes, because you get references to the condition on page X and the condition on page Y and the condition on page Z that supersedes the condition on page A, B and C. And it would be helpful, and I think particularly for members of the public, if the agreed conditions could be cut and pasted to the report at the start, and therefore you could just say, these conditions have been agreed by the applicant, and therefore everyone see from the start, what conditions have been agreed, without having to pick them up from all the individual emails and so on. And that would make the decisions easier to write as well for the lawyers, it seems to me, because then you could just add on any extra conditions that are agreed by the subcommittee, rather than having to have these great chains of joining the different sections together. I don't think it'd be that much more admin to do, or if anything, it would just move the admin to before the committee rather than after the committee.
Okay, any comment on that, David?
Chair, I'm happy to do anything that will clarify. I think we could look at simplifying the reports. I think there's some work to be done around the reports in general, and I agree with Councillor Whitehouse. That's certainly something I'm willing to take away and look at. Certainly for the flow, and obviously for residents that sit in there listening. It's not always easy to follow. Sometimes it won't always be possible. Sometimes agreements are made last minute and verbally, and therefore that will be obviously dealt with during a hearing. But yeah, when it's done in advance and in writing, then I see no reason why at the outset, obviously the officer can't clarify what those conditions are. There may be an issue in terms of publishing of reports. So the report that goes out may be slightly different to what the officer says, if that makes sense, because the reports need to be with Democratic Services for publishing. And sometimes if the agreement's not made until after that, then you won't have that information in that report. But we could possibly look to do that as a supplementary document. But any way that would help simplify that, I'm more than happy to do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kesker.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a comment, I remember Mr King reminded us last year that some of the conditions we were putting on our grants were in fact probably not legal, as a lot of deregulation had taken place. But nevertheless, applicants seemed quite happy to have these conditions put on them and to follow them. So it's just a comment on that, but just to go further from there, very nice to see that we had the applicants back in the chamber again, where you can actually see them and get a much better idea of who they are and their background and what it was all about.
Okay. Any comment on that, David?
No, Chair, only to say that I remember the conversation we had, Councillor Kesker, and they're not illegal, they're just not enforceable. So if they apply to a deregulated thing, but you are quite right, as a matter of good practice, I always advise licence holders, if there's a condition on your licence and that's what it says, even if technically you don't have to apply for it, it's there for your benefit as well as other residents. My advice would be to follow it.
Okay. So if there's nothing else on the procedures, we go on to item 12, matters arising. There is one item on consultation, I think.
Yeah, thank you. The committee will recall I drafted a report back in 2021 in November, I believe, regarding the 150-metre consultation that we currently undertake for licensing applications. Now, you will recall this is a consultation that we do over and above what's legally required of the council to do. And there's a number of issues with that I flagged up at the time. In particular, the financial cost is actually costing us more to facilitate this than we're actually generating in income, and under licensing we are meant to be operating under a cost recovery basis. During the meeting it was suggested that we also look at other regulatory regimes such as planning, and which we've subsequently done, and under planning there is no such additional consultation. So planning will generally only notify adjacent properties, or if it's a large development then they will look at that on a case-by-case basis, so it's not something that they routinely do. Things have subsequently moved on since then, Chair. Obviously, you know, you'll be aware of the financial constraints that we're under as a council in terms of not only the finance element but also the resource element. And it's been something that we've had to look at again, and the implications. So I would have liked to have drafted a report and brought it to the committee just to give you the full information tonight, but unfortunately the time didn't allow that. But I wanted to raise it at this juncture just to make the committee aware that this is something that we are looking to remove. Now, it doesn't mean that we won't be consulting widely. We will still continue to consult with ward councillors via the bulletins that go out weekly. We will also look to continue to notify town and parish councils, who in turn, if they then choose to consult wider, then they will be able to facilitate that themselves. But I just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any comments, anybody? So we're looking into this, in other words, it's so expensive, it's 150 metres consultation, that in future we hope to find a different way of doing it, similar to planning probably. Okay? Right, if there's any other matters arising anybody want to bring up? No? My apologies, I should have introduced Mandy Thompson to start with. She's David's assistant. She took over from Sally Devine, who
She's David's boss.
Pardon?
She's David's boss.
Oh, David's boss, sorry. Right. Yes, you remember Sally Devine, who was here. Mandy's taken over from her. So, before I close the meeting, just a few thank you. As you know, Adrian is leaving us in the near future. We thank Adrian for all the work he's done, especially with the Licence Committee. Been here 19 years, and he's done a lot of work, and we really miss him. And also, Jackie is up the top there. She's leaving us as well. And I think you all know that Rosie Ferrara, who is our legal advisor, she's left and then she'll come back again, but she's definitely leaving fairly soon. But thank you all for all your help and support. And I don't know what's going to happen. Who's going to replace you? Well, no one will replace you, Adrian, or Jackie. Exactly, yeah. Anyway, thank you all very much. If there's no other business, I declare the meeting closed. And thank you all for your attendance.
Thank you, Chair.